Hello, America. My name is Dylan John, and you're listening to Nature and the Nation. For today's episode, I will be looking at Atheopaganism by Mark Green. And this was copyright 2019. So this is a fairly recent book. And it's interesting. There's stuff in here I agree with and stuff I disagree with, as is often the case. And I don't want to be negative, so I'm going to focus on the stuff that I agree with a little bit more, but towards the end of the episode, I want to point out some things I agree with a little bit less in this book, things that frustrate me about it. He definitely leans leftward. He explicitly recommends that you vote for the Democrat Party at one point, and he has his reasons. I have my own reasons. If I wrote a book like this, I would probably make the opposite recommendation. I'm not that nonpartisan myself, but that's some of the stuff I disagree with. At any rate, I've got 5 sections that I want to look at in more detail. First, when he asks the fundamental question, what is a religion? He says, quote, "What is a religion? This is a question which vexes even religious experts. There is no universally accepted definition of the term religion, spirituality. Unfortunately, this can result in prejudicial conclusions about their definitions based on the nature of the religions dominating the West, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Each of these emphasizes the requirement of belief in a scientifically unsupported cosmology involving invisible persons, magical powers, etc. Yet such belief is not really at the heart of all religions. There are religions which don't care what you believe so long as you carry out the prescribed rituals. Ancient Greek and Roman religions, for example, or American Zen Buddhism. In my opinion, the only truly universally applicable definition of a religion is a functional one. And so I observe that each religious path contains 3 elements: a cosmology, an ideology, and a practice. Cosmology is what is believed about the nature of the universe, that there is a cosmic war between good and evil, for example, and heaven and hell as an afterlife, or that we are on a wheel of reincarnation until our karma is balanced, or that sacrificing human hearts will make the sun continue to rise. Ideology is the value set of the religion. What is considered sacred and what profane? What are the principles according to which one should live? Finally, practice is the somatic manifestation of the religion, the rituals, the prayers, the holy days, the rites of passage, etc. Note that belief alone does not create a religion. It takes ideology and practice too." End quote. So I like this because he asks the question, what is a religion? And then he attempts to provide an answer. Rather than just asking and pondering, he puts forth his definition, which I think is a fair one. Well, definition, at least it's a rough sketch of a definition. It's a combination of 3 things. Now, are they combined? I think there are obvious mechanisms that combine them. But if it's missing one of these 3, then it's not a religion? Probably not. I think that's a fair definition. Things are sometimes hard to define, but a practice alone, without a value system or anything to say about the nature of the world, that doesn't really sound like a religion. So yeah, it makes sense that all 3 of these things are required. It's a little more clear than Joseph Campbell's 4 features, which really kind of function in a way as these 3 plus the sense of awe, which this doesn't exactly hit on. The ideology or the value system was a separate element in Joseph Campbell's definition. So the sense of awe and involvement with the mysterious aspects of the world. And this is sort of the transcendent aspect that something like atheism has to struggle with. what makes it so awe-inspiring. And yeah, I think it is awe-inspiring, but you've got to include that in the definition a little bit, because the ideology is really just a value system. That's how he defines it. The cosmology is just an explanation. Practice is just, what you do. But the sense of awe is an important element. So maybe Joseph Campbell's four really are the superior classification. Anyhow, it's important that belief alone does not make a religion. That was the point he made at the end there. But he also talks a little bit about the human mind and the brain. And I like the part where he talks about the reptile brain, my favorite part of the brain, where he says, quote, "In the early 1950s, neuroscientist Paul MacLean introduced a model categorizing 3 functional complexes of the brain, each composed of several distinct structures. These 3 complexes are built in layers atop one another, from the very core of the brain to its outer regions, and developed in subsequent evolutionary phases. MacLean termed his model the triune brain. Its elements are the reptilian, or R complex, the limbic system, or mammalian brain, and the neocortex. Over the past 50 years, our growing knowledge about the functioning of the brain has refined and generally reinforced this broad model. The R complex is a set of core brain structures, including the brain stem and medulla, which remain largely the same as they were in our reptilian ancestors. It has 2 simple priorities: survive and reproduce. When we are in fight or flight mode, the R complex is running the show. When someone acts in a manner we describe as being driven by their hormones, it is the R complex, which has no comprehension of following rules to sustain relationships, which is in the driver's seat. The R complex is opportunistic, paranoid, and simple in its priorities. It does not have morals. The R complex is where our fear, our violence, our territoriality, our reflex responsiveness to social hierarchy, and our impulse to submit to those we perceive as more powerful than ourselves live. As the earliest part of our minds, and the part most completely focused on survival, the R complex can and does assert control of our behavior when it concludes that our life is on the line." End quote. So that sounds like a super important part of the brain, and one that is neglected in today's world, and one that I think you'll see is perhaps neglected by the author. I think he's a little overly fond of the limbic system and the neocortex, and dismissive of the reptile brain. Many such cases. I think we'll see later on that sometimes, where does it show itself? It needs to show itself because we wouldn't still have it if it wasn't still serving a function, you know what I mean? Obviously our digestive system and our heart beating require brain components to regulate, but there's more than that going on, obviously, in our reptile brains, our instinctive fear and aggression and the other various base animal drives, so to speak. We wouldn't still carry these things around if they didn't serve a function. So I tend to think we should defer to our brain and how it's built and what it does. Anyhow, he talks about how religion is an evolved strategy of human beings. He says, quote, "There are beneficial functions which historically have been delivered by religion, even long after it ceased to be the central organizing principle of Western societies. Religion, as an evolved strategy, which enables the potentially warring impulses of the different parts of our minds to have their needs met. In fact, this is almost a tautology. If religion didn't perform practical, effective services for its adherents, it likely would have faded long ago. Exploring a way forward through a new model will require not only dispensing with the superstition and fantasized cosmology of religion, but incorporating those elements of religious tradition which provide these personal and social functions. We pass through our lives trying to meet the needs of these very different parts of our minds. which are not infrequently in conflict, and usually without being aware we are doing so. When we are successful in this, we are happy. We say our lives are satisfying, fulfilling, meaningful. But functionally, what we mean when we say this is that we have satisfied the imperatives of our three brains. We have made safe the lizard, petted the dog, and provided meaning and stimulation to the thinker. Religion, therefore, despite positing cosmologies and supernatural processes which are fictitious, is not simply something stupid left over from more ignorant times. Religious practices and traditions build community among their adherents, provide a reassuring sense of moral purpose and meaning, teach values that create ways of knowing how to negotiate morally complex or ambiguous moral situations, and tell reassuring stories of deific support, survival after death, and a cosmic design that renders a given life more weight than merely as the accidental outcome of a nearly random combination of history and genetics. They teach practices which clear, reassure, and calm the mind, such as meditation, prayer, and ritual, equipping adherents with social and psychological resources every bit as useful and powerful as the technological tools science provides in the material realm. Religion is a uniquely human strategy, which serves the function of helping our three brains fulfill their motivations, and even to get along better with one another. End quote. I like what he's saying. He talks about how it's an evolved strategy. We've satisfied our the different parts of our brain, and there's probably something there to that. In order to work, it can't leave parts of us unsatisfied. So that would make sense. But that doesn't mean that every religion is equally successful at fulfilling this function. If religion has a function to fulfill, one would think that some religions are better suited to the function and others less, and that's how we have such things as survival strategies in religions. They have to survive in order to grow, in order to pass on their processes genetically as well as socially. There has to be a threat of elimination. The elimination is a core component of evolutionary processes. And if a religion isn't serving its function, it goes extinct. Anyhow, let's move to the next section. He talks about values a little bit here, which is certainly an important question. What are values? Where do we get them from? What should they say about us? I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail about this. You should pick the book up if you're interested in this sort of thing, and the idea of how to have a sort of scientifically materialist religion. What is easy about that, and what is difficult is a relative term. But some of these parts are, I think, coming up with values and why you should have some rather than others is probably the most important part, one of, if not the most important part of this process of trying to reformulate a post-scientific religion, a materialist religion. He says, quote, "We can't talk about religion or define a new one without addressing the issue of what is to be considered sacred, what it means, and how it informs the values by which the practitioner is expected to live. While many traditional religions seek to define the sacred as an inherent quality possessed by certain objects, beings, or activities, and therefore not by others, at root sacredness is an ascribed quality, an opinion. It is applied to whatever is highly valued by the tradition or practice in question, and to those objects, events, and practices which evoke internal narratives which communicate the religion's beliefs and values. So what exactly is sacred to an atheist pagan, an Atheopagan, at least to this one? Only four things, ultimately, to me. These are the four pillars: the world, beauty, truth, love." End quote. I skipped out a bunch of stuff where he doesn't just list them. he goes into great detail about the world, beauty, truth, and love. I'm not going to read what he says about each of those things. I just want to point at them and say that those are all important values, but why those four as opposed to any other four? I think the best answer is instinctively. That's what this author feels the most drawn to as things that should be important. This is a proposition of what four values are the most important. And, what are those things and what are values? I don't think this book really explains what a value is. It kind of says that religion serves this purpose, and so trying to craft an atheopagan religion requires the crafting of values. But that's sort of inherited from the definition he proposed of religion. And without really ironing out what a value is, it's hard to say why these four are the four. I guess he just says basically this is what he values. It's an assertion. It's an assertion of will to say one rather than the other. And so he asserts his will in saying these four, which is fine. Nothing wrong with asserting your will, right? And they're abstract enough that they've all got, and especially when he talks about the worlds, he says, most specifically the biosphere and life. So that's a little bit of a clarification. But all these, both the world as matter and life, could have gods stand in for them. They all are that sort of abstract ideal that Plato talks about: beauty, truth, love. I mean, Aphrodite kind of was like love. It was the same thing as what, there was a sense in which it was an anthropomorphic figure, and there was a sense in which it was just the same thing. Like if you talk about justice, the word for justice is the same as the word for the goddess of justice. And there are many other examples. But there's only four of them, and I feel like there's some that are missing. So let me jump to the next section where I begin to want to speak about what I find missing or incorrect in this book. And that's the section on hierarchy, where he says, quote, "Nowhere in this work is there any suggestion of hierarchical levels or priest or priestesses. As I choose to practice my Atheopagan religion, there are none. While a particular person might take on responsibility for organizing or designing a given ritual, no Atheopagan participant is higher in status or standing than any other. It's a sadly familiar tale in the pagan community. The coven or local organization that is run by a charismatic high priestess or high priest, or both, doling out training and degrees of advancement based on how well the subject toes the line, fawns over the priest or priestess, and, in some particularly sad cases, provides them with sexual favors as a part of the initiatory process. Or the narcissistic pagan leader who works to cultivate a young and pretty entourage of on-tap adorers as part of imparting their wisdom to followers, and for whom those not so young or pretty never quite seem to make the grade for advancement. Or the dirty secret that eventually comes out about some bright and innocent aspiring newbie who ends up being harassed and driven away by such a leader. But wait, isn't that essentially the sad and common story in pretty much every religious community? I'll cut to the chase. The entire model of hierarchy in power, respect, and even obedience in a spiritual community is rotten to its core. It is a guaranteed formula for abuse. It is the same as when bosses have power over employees, when teachers have power over students, and when adults have power over children. And while those power gradients may be inevitable, we don't have to have them in religion. We see it in the Christians, we see it in the Buddhists, we see it in the pagans. Doesn't matter the cosmology and practice. Having some people who are considered more advanced and important in a religious context just doesn't keep people safe. End quote. So, I can't disagree with this enough. Hierarchy is an important part of life. He says it's inevitable in some relationships. Certainly when adults have power over children, parents have power over their children, teachers have power and authority over their students. It's just a part of reality. It's a part of civilization. It's a part of nature. So when he says that it may be inevitable in some places, but we don't have to have it in religion, I would say, why not? Why not? It's a natural phenomena. All the way down to lobsters, as Jordan Peterson points out, to have some sort of dominance hierarchy. So, I don't see, there may be problems in various communities with leadership, but people should be able to identify good leaders. You don't just follow anybody. And, ideally, institutions are built to promote competent people into positions of power. Ideally, that's idealistic, but it's also, right, that's kind of the way things work. To some extent, it's true. He says later that he's the primary voice at Atheopaganism.org on the Facebook Atheopaganism group. And he says his is the name most associated with the path because he started it. He's devoted a significant chunk of his life to helping to build and raise the visibility of its vision and practices. He says, but I am not the high priest of the Atheopagans. And it seems to me like, just go for it, dude. You made the Facebook page. You made the website. You created the name. You wrote the book. You lay down the rules. No Atheopagan participant is higher in status or standing than any other. Well, when I think about this, and I think about what we talked about in the last episode, and the situation in Europe with immigration and the challenges of completely transforming the continent of Europe by the end of the century, utterly turning it upside down, and the various millions of unnameable crises that could arise. And I think that a religion has to be up to the task. And a religion that is so timid around authority and seizing authority and taking authority and exerting itself on the world is missing something. And I would look at those 4 values that he lists off there: the world, truth, beauty, and love. And I say those are 4 good goddesses, actually. But what about authority and hierarchy? Aren't these also valuable gods, archetypes, patterns of behavior, aspects of your civilization, aspects of your religion, aspects of your life and of yourself that we should embrace because they serve a purpose? 4 is too few. He doesn't even mention Apollo and Dionysus, and obviously this is Atheopaganism. He doesn't talk about the gods in that way. But why bring about the 4 values? What are they? Why are they there? If you just feel them, then those are just impulses and instincts, and that's fine. Maybe they are impulses and instincts, but that's certainly not the, what about the lizard brain? That's really the base, most fundamental, foundational source of instincts. If you're looking for a source for your values amongst the instincts. Anyhow, thank you very much for listening. I'll talk to you again next time.